Welcome everyone to today's AWI Extension New South Wales webinar. Today we are going to be joined by Jim Metcalf from JM Livestock, and we're going to be talking all about the productive flock and how productive your flock can be if we look at hitting some targets and really think about how we're going to lift some results across the board to improve productivity and therefore profitability. My name, if you do not know me by now, which would be hard to believe, is Fiona MacArthur, and I'm a member of the AWI Extension New South Wales team. I'm just going to launch a quick little poll for you before we get started, and most of you should be well and truly over this by now. So what is your industry role? Wool grower, advisor, student, educator, or veterinarian? And where are you from? What best describes your location? New South Wales non-seasonal rainfall, New South Wales in the summer rainfall in the slopes and plains, New South Wales in the summer rainfall on the tablelands, other states, and also overseas. So wherever you're from, it is great to have you on board today. Thanks for joining us. All this information is really helpful for me here as feedback, but it's also great for Jim before he gets started to have a little bit of an idea about where people are dialing in from today and what your season might be, because it's a bit of a tale of two states still across New South Wales. So I'm just going to end that poll now and share the results on the screen for you all. And we have 74% wool growers today, 13% advisors, 4% student or educator, 9% veterinarians, and we have New South Wales summer rainfall, non-seasonal rainfall, 22%, summer rainfall slopes and plains, 4%, New South Wales summer rainfall in the tablelands, 9%, other states, 65%. Welcome everybody from across our borders and no one from overseas today. So thanks everyone for joining us. Little bit of quick housekeeping. You're all in listen only mode. There are two tabs that you can pay attention to. The Q&A tab is for question time, but use it anytime you like. I'll get the questions ready to give to Jim at the end of the presentation. Having any dramas, which we're not going to have today, we're going to be super IT friendly, is the chat function if you'd like to have a chat to me. Otherwise, I thank you in advance for filling out our post-webinar survey. So I'll stop sharing now and we will get Jim's presentation up on board. And for those of you who haven't met Jim, Jim's joined us on a few webinars in the past. He's a regular here at AWI Extension New South Wales, and he has his own consulting business, JM Livestock. Established back in 2019, it provides specialist advice to sheep producers with a focus on production of high quality food and fibre for use in industry with best practice land use and livestock management. Jim has a strong understanding of mixed farming and grazing production systems. Research, development and extension has placed Jim in a fortunate position to offer sheep producers practical, independent and proven research and development advice to improve your sheep enterprises. Coming from today from Cootamundra in southwest slopes of New South Wales. Jim's approach to grazing, mixed farming and dual purpose sheep enterprises yields significant gains across these districts and as part of JM Livestock Advisors. Hails from my area back in his day from UNE and was also a New South Wales sheep and wool officer up in the New England as well. So he's certainly got a lot of background in sheep. He's also one of our industry engagement officers for lifetime ewe management, winning wieners for profit, bred well, fed well, and AWI supported sheep livestock management workshops, Simplify, Stratify and Amplify. So we couldn't have anyone better on board. It's great to have you back, Jim. I haven't had you on for a while. So looking forward to today's presentation. It's going to be a good one. Thank you.
G'day, Fiona. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. It's good to have a big list of participants on board. How's that coming through, Fiona?
Wonderful. I have your presentation. You're good to go.
Good to go. Great. All right. Well, listen, we'll dive into it. No technical hitches, hopefully, for the next 50 minutes. So, yeah, as I said, based down in Cootamundra these days after a little stint in Wagga. and previously being up in the New England. So I see a few New Englanders. Welcome to the webinar. That's great. So today's webinar was kicked off after a discussion we had at a recent field day in the Central Tablelands. And rather than going into headlong into a great discussion about minerals and vitamins and all the benefits of EID, I decided to get back to the fundamental basics of sheep production and build off a strong foundation. So yeah, along the way on that day, I sort of touched on a few key points, and that's formed the basis of today's presentation. So you've got your top 7 sort of key foundation stones that we'll build upon as we work our way through this. Now, a few of you must be giggling in the background. Hang on, Jim, you're talking EID, weren't you the chief business manager with Allflex? And yes, I was. And we did roll out EID in Victoria a few years ago, and it was pushed about all the data that's going to be collected and all the great decisions that you're going to be able to make. So yeah, listen, it's a bit of a step back away from that, and we just want to really hone in on some of these basics here today. Okay, so basically pasture supply and demand, joining length, lambing length, when you're going to need feed, how critical at that time of year the feed needs to be for lambing, just some basics on enterprise choices, condition score and food on offer targets. So that acronym FOO is food on offer. You'll hear me talk about condition scores and FOO a bit through today's presentation. Pregnancy scanning, lamb survival, why the benefits of peg scanning are so obvious, even though a lot of us aren't doing it. Just touching on genetics, it wouldn't be a talk from Jim without a little touch on genetics, breeding objectives, classing, and then finally just picking performer ewes and helping identify a strong foundation for your flock right from the get-go. So just heads up, here we go, slideshow, there we go. So we've got a little bit of data here from Agrista. Came from a publication that Agrista did last year on why stay in wool sheep. Now, what's alarming is that on average, sheep, wool, prime lamb, dual purpose flocks are all hovering around that $20, $25 per DSE net profit. Beef as well. The top 20% of businesses benchmarked all indicated, a $50 to $55 per DSE. So there's not a lot of variation really in enterprises. It comes to pick and stick. I want to sort of call it pick and stick. Do what you do and do it well. Do what you like doing and do it well. Improve what's in the enterprise rather than thinking things would be easier if you had cows or some other type of sheep other than the sheep that you're running. So there's plenty of opportunity within your own enterprise. I won't dwell too much on that. There's a great webinar coming up, I think next week, about the benefits of more in-depth financial analysis of your business and where the opportunities lie financially. So I'll leave that to next month's presenter. Now, when it comes to pasture growth and feed demand, it's very, very important that you identify when your pasture is growing, when your peak demand is going to be. So that is determined basically by the date you put your rams in. 5 months later, it's going to be lambs on the ground, and about 3 weeks after lambing kicks into full swing, your peak pasture demand will kick in from those lactating ewes. Optimizing your enterprise based on soil, climate, your pasture base, whether that be natives or whether that be highly improved pastures, really does determine the length of your growing season and when that pasture is going to be most available. So the goalposts have shifted in point 3. I think the supply chain's really doing the heavy lifting for the heavier lamb carcasses out there. Heavier weights require more time, more energy, more resources. So I can understand completely why there's been a push to head into more of a late autumn, early winter lambing, just gives you a few more months to try and stack the kilos on those lambs. But as you're seeing at the moment, a lot of that carryovers, heavyweight lambs has been achieved at the expense of supplementary feeding or pasture supply used through the autumn this year and into winter. Now, grazing crops traditionally are very successful at filling that winter feed gap. Just a bit of a tough break in 2025 to get those grazing crops up and away. When it comes to building resilience within the system, I've been involved with a little project talking about confinement feeding throughout a couple of states in the last couple of months. Anyone who's got a good confinement feeding setup, or even a really basic one, will find it a very successful strategy in dealing with a late break or a dry season, or filling supplementary feed requirements in this sort of drought that we've been having. Now, there's been a stack of webinars previously delivered by Nicole Logg. The last two webinars on AWI Extension New South Wales have focused heavily on feeding through drought and filling that winter feed gap. So brush up on that, but we will be talking energy requirements. We will be talking condition score targets and what it means to get there. But again, I'll just stress, peak feed demand, it's in your control. It's your joining date. So when you put the rams out determines pretty much 5-6 months later when that peak feed demand is going to be. Just figure out if you're breeding or feeding. So if you're breeding in a merino enterprise, you've probably got a little bit longer to get through to a yearling or even a hogget for joining in those maiden ewes. But if you're feeding sheep and you're feeding prime lambs, you've got to keep the foot down and get them finished and get them to heavier weights. Okay, so here's a simple feed supply, feed demand. You can see this enterprise is a little bit out of sync. It's probably trying to creep too far into that April-May period when the real feed supply is coming on much more so in July and August. Just figuring out your pasture supply curve, your feed and your feed demand, matching that up. There's some pretty handy tools out there available, free access just to dial that in and see where your deficiencies are. Here we have energy required by a 50 kilogram standard reference weight condition score 3U. The yellow line is for a twin and the single line is the blue line, and a dry sheep is basically the flat line at the bottom. So this graph has a lot of detail, a lot of information in it, and you need to get your head around this if you want to successfully breed sheep and have high ewe conception rates and have high lamb survival. At about 8 megajoules of energy, a dry sheep will maintain herself quite happily, or a wether will happily maintain himself throughout the 12-month production cycle. Sometimes there's obviously more feed on and a little bit less at other times. What you've got happening at around day 80, day 90 is a divergence of twins and singles though. You can just start to see that little 1-2 megajoules of energy difference at scanning time, which is typically around day 80, day 90. As we move through towards late pregnancy, twins have a much higher demand, singles a little bit less. So it makes perfect sense to split your singles out from your twins. And no better time to do that than at that preg-scanning time. Obviously, as you get through into 10, 20, 30 days peaking in lactation, you can see the difference between your singles and twins being upwards of 14, 15 megajoules per head per day. Really, 6 megajoules per head per day, peaking in the difference there. One of the key features, whoa, hang on. Put the mouse wheel away. One of the key energy savings I'll talk about a little bit later on is that 8 megajoules for a dry sheep can be reduced to 7.3 megajoules if we contain those sheep in a confinement feeding setup. So Really big take-home message today. If you are confinement feeding, your sheep will be saving 15% on their energy requirements. So massive saving, whether that be twins, singles, or dry sheep. I think I've got that pretty well covered. Righto. So next slide is, if you thought a twin merino, small frame, 50 kilo merino needed a lot of energy when she was lactating with twins, take a look at a 70 kilo maternal, large frame, maternal type sheep. They're going to be nudging up over 35 megajoules when peak lactation is on. What does 35 megajoules look like? It's lush clover, it's perennial grasses, it's up to your ankles. It's about 3 kilograms of barley per head per day. That's the kind of mammoth amounts of feed that we're talking about meeting those energy requirements. So just moving into condition scores, how, when, and why, critical component of a successful enterprise. It's a subjective assessment of the fat and muscle over the loin muscle area, the short ribs, the backbone. It's a scale of 1 to 5. There's plenty of resources out there. There's key times of the year to do it. I feel the key times with my clients are weaning, pre-joining, preg scanning. That's splitting out your twins and singles. So post scanning, you need to run your hand over the singles, run your hand over the twinners, and find out where the mob is at. Obviously, pre-lambing, if you're doing your crutching or vaccinations, drenches, pre-lambing, there's still an opportunity to address condition score deficiencies pre-lambing. And the other critical time that isn't on the next slide is obviously your rams, making sure your rams aren't overcooked or fat score 4 or plus. It's pretty easy for them to get away from you in a good winter, in a big spring. We just need to keep a handle on our rams as well. Now, all the targets that are talked about in the coming slides, they've come from the Lifetime Wool Research Project, and those targets are to achieve the most profitable outcomes from the flock. So we're really interested in flock performance, differential management. If the flock has vastly different condition scores in a mob of twins, we really need to address separating the skinnies from the fats, or if the fat ones are getting a little bit too chubby, we need to throttle them back a bit. There's still time to do that with your singles as well. It's really practical. It's very quick. We don't have to do every sheep in every mob to get an idea where the flock is going to be at. About 50 ewes will give us a very good average. And from those 50, you can start to make decisions around your differential management. So there it is, the critical times and when it happens. You can sort of pick it up at any time through your production cycle, but obviously at weaning time, we should see, or at lamb marking or around weaning, we should see peak lactation, stripping condition out of the ewes. They should be at their lowest point around weaning time, hopefully starting to rise up as springtime, better favourable pasture conditions turn up. But there's a long time between weaning and pre-joining, and we need to use that time to our advantage to address condition score deficiencies. Condition scores are really important because they ensure basically pregnancy, getting ewes pregnant. Obviously, there's a response we'll talk about in a moment about higher condition scores potentially having more multiple ovulation, more twins on board. We can use our condition score to optimise birth weight both in the early and late stages of pregnancy. When things are going south and it's really tight winter here at the moment in the south, there's still an opportunity to be addressing lamb survival by keeping your condition score levels up towards these targets of 3.3 for your twinners. Condition score is going to help lamb birth weight. It's going to help ewes bond with lambs. It's going to help a good lactation. Gives those progeny a good start in early life. Moving your way through pregnancy, again, the critical time there is at preg scanning. If you had to do one condition scoring exercise a year, you'd definitely be doing it at pregnancy scanning just to basically optimize your singles and twins. If you're in confinement feeding, you can really start to hone in and feed budget accordingly for your singles and twins. This is an optimum condition score profile for use late winter, spring lambing on green feed. So that's a critical take-home message for this profile. Every climatic zone throughout Australia has a different condition score profile, as will different enterprises. So the bottom point there, enroll in a lifetime ewe management group. If you haven't done the program, get involved in it. It'll teach you the basics, the fundamentals. It'll really get your skill levels up there, and it'll teach you about feed budgeting and manipulating and managing condition score profiles. Gaining condition score when you've got green feed in the system is the cheapest and easiest way to do it. It's very hard to do. It's uneconomic to feed sheep to really gain condition score. Remember again that these condition score targets that are on the screen there in front of you, they are targets. It's not a competition to see who can have the fattest sheep. Fat sheep don't perform better, and especially at lambing time when we see higher mortalities for both, higher mortalities occurring when we've got sheep that are overcooked, far too high in condition score, which has been easy to achieve in a couple of big wet autumns, early autumn breaks, big autumns, good winters. Condition score hasn't been a problem, but keeping weight off has been quite a challenge. But this year it's the opposite, and we're seeing ewes probably a shade under these targets just because of seasonal conditions. Big point there is condition score at joining really is determined by the season, and that is determined by how long those ewes have had to recover since weaning. And listen, a little bit over at joining, that's a good thing, and a little bit under, well, it's just if you miss those targets, it'll be reflected in your scanning results, and it makes it all the more important to make sure the lambs do survive and the ewes do lamb down well. You can see there that it's not a condition score flat line. It's not a flat line 3 all the way through the season. This profile for a late winter spring lambing on green pasture, we're using green pasture to give us that kick out of pregnancy scanning, especially for our twinners, achieving that high profile over our singles. Post-lambing, we should see some weight loss. The ewes should be working really hard, and then weaning on time basically allows those ewes to again recover with some green feed still in the system in late spring and early summer. Every enterprise is different depending on when you're lambing, what your target markets are, what your pasture growth is going to be. Some profiles will come in a bit higher and come out a bit lower. Really important to understand the enterprise that you are running in the climatic zone that you're running it in. So just going back to confinement feeding, anybody who's done the Lifetime Ewe course should have an ECM table on their kitchen table. At the moment down south and over the border in South Australia or Victoria, Tasmania, lots and lots of feeding going on there. And if you want to save yourself 15% straight up, get your sheep in confinement through that mid-pregnancy, basically, stages, you can save yourself some monumental amounts of feed and input costs, okay? That little table there is from the Lifetime Wool Feed Budgets. If you haven't got it, get onto woolga.com, check it down. And, to be honest, it's probably explains a lot of why some sheep are in confinement and coming out looking rather well. They're actually being overfed. They're getting a ration that's the equivalent to being supplemented in a paddock, whereas in confinement, they're just not walking around chasing the pick, chasing the feed, trying to, look for some sustenance over the hill. They basically get what they need. They don't burn it off, and you can manage your condition scores a whole lot better. Just a little simple confinement feeding setup from our Lockhart way there. on the right hand side as well. So back on your condition score profiles, why is it so important? Well, missing these targets can mean more supplementary feeding, can mean reduced lamb survival, can really mean a whole lot more ewe mortality, certainly if you miss the targets for your twins. Just stress that point. So here is a little thing you could do with your EIDs as EID becomes mandatory across the country. In the next couple of years, you should be able to spit out some numbers relating to what is the condition score and conception rate response to increasing condition score. And through the research from the Lifetime Wool Project, on average, flocks responded at a rate of around 20 more lambs per 100 ewes joined when they were 1 condition score heavier. So a 2 at joining might be a bit light, but a 3 at joining would be ideal. If you just shifted the target from, say, 2.5 up to 3.5, the slope of that regression is 20% response rate. And I feel going around different districts doing things like lifetime year management, talking to producers, this slope and these condition score conception response rates explains a lot of why flocks are scanning 140 one year and 160 the next year, and then they're back to 120 and then back to 150, and they jump around all over the place. And if you actually understood what it was happening at joining time by condition scoring your ewes, finding some skinny ones, finding some fat ones, seeing what the response rate is, whether it's 20% or 30% or 10%, this will explain a hell of a lot about why scanning percentages jump around a lot. Now, if you do have a really responsive flock and joining at 3.5 condition score is achievable, why wouldn't you do it if more lambs in your business is what you're chasing? Conversely, if you want lots of singles and you don't want lots and lots of lambs in your enterprise, well, sure, run them at 2.5, and you won't have a lot of multiples in your when it comes to scanning. Very, very simple calculations to be done, something that can give you a whole lot of information. So yeah, just keep in mind, generally the response rate is 20%, but your flock might be better than that. I've seen 40s and I've seen 10s. So yeah, it's nice to know what it is that you could unearth in your flock there. Now, if you did have a really responsive flock, wouldn't it be great to be able to do something about that pre-joining if you were chasing more lambs? So if you could put on half a condition score, pick up an extra 10 lambs per 100 ewes quite easily, have better survival by having better condition score going into pregnancy, it's going to lead a long way towards having a higher lamb marking percentage, more weaners to sell, more selection intensity within your flock. So keys to hitting your condition score targets and why it matters. Well, the keys to hitting the targets are shortening your joining length. 5 weeks is the optimal if you are joining January into the main joining season. However, I'll address out of season joinings in a moment. Condition score targets can be achieved a lot better if you pregnancy scan. Hitting them for twins and singles is pretty hard to do if you don't pregnancy scan and manage those 2 separate mobs accordingly. Hitting your food targets, you passed your food targets, food on offer, very critical in terms of setting ewes up for good lambing, good condition score leading into lambing, weaner growth rates, all of the above. Weaning at 12 to 14 weeks is desirable. That is industry best practice. You'll see why in a moment. If you haven't got it, really good little tip here is that the Lambing Planner app from it's at the Department of Ag in Western Australia. Great little app there. You can put your enterprises in there if you've got split joinings, whatever. Put all your dates in, and it gives you nice little prompts when rams should be coming out, when book the preg scanner, gives you all your sort of calendar of events Also gives you nice little prompts to make sure you're on track. Check your condition scores, little tips that pop up in there. Great little app there, supported from AWI, MLA, and the Department of Ag out of Western Australia. So terrific app, that one. So just moving forward into these 4 points there. Length of joining. There is no benefit in a merino enterprise from joining 7 weeks, especially when you're in a in-season joining, so January through to April, May's. The extra lambs that you might get, they don't actually make it to a hogget. They end up being the tail end of your weaners. They sort of tail off out of the system. The class that comes and says you're too small and weedy, they get booted out. It's constraining the timeliness of other critical events. So lamb marking, mulesing, weaning, the longer you leave the rams in, the longer you're tempted to leave weaning to. We really want to try and whittle it back to, ideally 14 weeks or less from the beginning of lambing. This year, in some areas, we might be back to, 8 or 10 weeks if possible. In season, that's your January, February, March, April, May. If you're joining later than that, 1% plus 1 rams to use. Nice little gain. If you were joining in, say, January and you weren't happy with your scanning results, you could just leave it a month, put the rams out a month later, and you'll probably pick up about 12% per month. And that goes again for March, and that goes again into April. So our New Englanders up there joining in April, if you went down to the pub and you talked to them about their scanning percentages, you'd be gobsmacked and quite amazed just how high they are compared to, say, down at Wagga when the rams go out in December. There could be easily 30-40% differences from the same bloodlines or the same type of sheep, just purely on seasonality. Big gains to be made there. Now, caveat to that is if you're out of season joining, October through to December, we probably, 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks, you do need to allow for that ram effect. There are some strategies you can use to try and tighten that joining up. Early and lating, pregnancy scanning has been an obvious one. You do need higher ram percentages. If you're using teasers, if you're not using higher ram percentages, you're wasting your time with the teasers. Melatonin, regular implants is another way of doing it. A split joining strategy is another way of addressing early joining, late joining, capturing those ones that are cycling earlier, getting some terminal lambs, prime lambs on the ground out of them, and then backing up everything else with a merino joining in your main joining later on. There's some options there. But again, early and lating, as I'll talk about in a minute. Pre-scanning, just a fundamental time in good sheep enterprises. 80 to 90 days scanning for multiples from the day the ram goes in. It's like your mid-season review. It's a red flag if we've got issues with ram fertility, ewe fertility. Was the joining successful? What are your dry percentages? Some key performance indicator, KPI metrics that we can measure to manage. It forces you to be accountable. You'll know exactly how many fetuses are on board if you do scan for multiples. You can dial that into lambing percentages, lamb survival, twin lamb survival versus single lamb survival. We've heard some pretty good results down south already this year. High 90s, high 80s, mid 90s for your singles. But the twinners have been doing it pretty tough wherever the feed cart or the feeders have been, doing that disturbance, just haven't had the feed in the paddocks. But still, it makes you accountable, and I guarantee a twin mob doing 130% a long way in front of a single mob doing, say, 85. So, yeah, you got to look after your twinners. Dry percentages, big questions to be asked on dries. If everything else joined up and you had condition score on the ewes, and if the percentage is a little bit too high, you might want to go and investigate your ram team. Again, little flag there for the Ramping Up Repro workshop. Terrific one-day workshop to get out there and focus in on the boys' health side of things. Preg scanning, if you don't preg scan twins and singles, how can you differentially manage your twins and singles? and hit those condition score targets. If you've got a nice 5-week joining, you don't really need to do early and lating. However, early and lating is a great 10 cents well spent, especially in a dry season where you might want to sort of just, you don't have to have everything full production feeding leading into lambing. You've just got to concentrate on those earlies, and then hopefully the pasture can come away and take care of your late ones. Early and lating has also been used really successfully in those boom seasons to prevent dystocia in your late singles. You've got to act now on the day of scanning to meet those, get hands on, get those condition scores sorted out. Differential management to meet energy requirements. As I said, talking about confinement feeding earlier, a great opportunity just to shave a couple of megajoules off your singles and give those to your twinners if need be, or the skinny twinners if need be. Feed to maintain, not regain. Regaining condition score is very costly, very uneconomic, often unachievable, but feeding to maintain condition score towards those critical condition score targets pre-lambing, mid-pregnancy is the time to do it. Apologies on the quality of the slide on the right, but we do have these fact sheets in the mail out from Fiona at the end of the webinar. So pregnancy scanning, really strong, like really strong benefits on the economics of preg scanning. On average, $5.55 across multiple sheep production zones in Australia. On average, $2.65 per ewe when only doing wet and dries. Those numbers might be a bit more beneficial this year when you've got dry ewes going out to the sale yards at $250, $350 per head. So, it's only a matter of good management will weed out those dry ewes, identify your twinners, keep them on track, manage your singles accordingly. Bigger benefits are had when you've got a shorter growing season. So the shorter the growing season, the bigger the chances of a short spring or a dry season popping into the equation. You get bigger benefits, and flocks with more multiples obviously will gain bigger benefits. So again, if you're up in the New England and you've got scanning percentages of 170, 160, 170, that means you've got a lot of twins. You need to look after those twinners to get better lamb survival out of those. Lambing condition score targets, what are they? And the food targets for singles and twins. Ideally, if we are in that sort of late winter, spring lambing situation coming into, which a lot of your slopes and tablelands flocks are going to be, we really want to see our singles somewhere around 2.7 to 3 condition score, lambing down into a paddock with 1,200 food on offer. The Merino twinners, listen, 3.3 to 3.5 would be a really ideal spot for those twinners to be pre-lambing, going into lambing paddocks at 1,800 food on offer. I'll just give another plug. I've done hundreds and hundreds of pasture cuts. I'll tell you what's a lot easier if you just dial into the AWI food on offer library and go through that resource and familiarise yourself with it and your pastures, the pictures, the dry matter cuts, the food on offer, the digestibility, the ME of those pastures. You can use those to visually estimate pretty accurately the paddocks that those ewes are going to be going into. The one there on the right, God help us if we could just have a few paddocks like that. That'd be fantastic, but they're coming. That's about 1,300 food on offer. It's probably 2 to 3 centimetres in height. It's up to bit over the welt of your Blundstone boots. Good quality, very high quality pasture. That's got clover, good vegetative pasture growth. Would be an ideal pasture to be lambing down some singles or even some twinners. If it's the best paddock you had, definitely go for that with your twinners and top up a bit. Why is condition score so important? This is the slide. This is the research takeaway from Lifetime Wool. This is the big one for me and a lot of my clients. The singles are pretty bulletproof. Compared to your multiples, the green line there on the left, that's the response of lamb survival to ewe condition score at lambing. So if we underdo it just a little bit and we end up hitting, our twinners going out on average at 3 score, we should have been at 3.5, but we've just missed it by a bit. We go from sort of 65% survival at 3 score. If you drop that back to 2.5 score, you've just dropped, you're basically dropping a lot of lamb survival, 60%. If we hit our target at 3.5, we'd be somewhere around 70-75%, which is 150% lambs marked to use lambing, which would be a great result. Your singles, though, as I say, they are bulletproof. The graph on the right is the explanation for lamb survival. It all comes down to birth weight. If I told you that you could add 0.5 kilo of lamb birth weight to your twinners, you'd probably you'd be willing to pay a fair bit for it in this current market to lift your survival from, say, 3.5 towards 4, or 4 up to 4.5, which would be optimal. You're looking at massive lifts, aren't you? 20% lift in lamb survival quite easily just by lifting some birth weight. If you said that's pretty easy, you'd ask, how could you do that? Well, it's called gaining half a condition score, or gaining a condition score. So maintaining early condition score in early pregnancy sets up great placental development, and then rising up in late pregnancy, that last 50 days to arrive at our condition score targets, will contribute a lot to higher lamb birth weights, most definitely in our twinners. So if you've got good pasture, you need to prioritise it and give that to your twinners. Condition score in late pregnancy can influence birth weight by up to 0.5 kilogram in condition score in single and twins. So if you had the choice of which paddock to put twinners into, absolutely give them the one that's going to give the ewes a chance to gain condition score. Listen, condition score is one thing, food on offer is another, but shelter plays a really big part in this. Mob size, if we're going to go in and be disturbing mobs for supplementary feeding, the smaller the mob, the better. One of the big sort of take-home messages from Lifetime Ewe management is a chill index table, which shows the benefits of having the right food on offer, the right condition score, better birth weights equal better lamb survival. Trying to find a sheltered paddock versus one that's probably open and exposed to the southwest without a lot of cover can really knock around your lamb survival. Best practice weaning, wean on time, 12 to 14 weeks. If you see down there, 12 weeks, basically the lambs are getting bugger all from mum and a whole lot from the pasture. There's no point leaving them on really after 12 weeks. It just might fit in with other activities. Mulesing, obviously, if you're mulesing, you need to give those wounds time to heal up from lamb marking. A short joining allows you to get the marking done a lot earlier and basically get through and get things weaned on time. Best practice is weaning 12 to 14 weeks. It allows us to use plenty of time to gain condition score. Peak lactation is about week 3, week 4, and that's when that demand really kicks in. Limited nutrition from milk is going to the lambs after week 10. So if you've got a 5-week joining, you've only got to get sort of 5 and 5. We'll give you 10 weeks on the elder sheep. You might want to give them sort of 7 or 8 weeks, which gives you about 13 weeks for those later born lambs. Competition for pasture, passing on parasite burdens. It's a great opportunity to get the weaners out of the paddock and into a fresh paddock. We're aiming for 45% of a standard reference weight, so we might try and include the standard reference weight calculator in the add-ons. If we had a 60 kilo reference weight, that's asking for a minimum 27 kilogram weaning weight. So if you've got weaners under that weight, it's best to differential management on those lighter ones. Get them into a separate paddock and away from the bigger, healthier weaners. Really, you're looking for a metric of 95% weaner survival from lambs marked is best practice. If you're not achieving that, you need to investigate why that isn't happening. Um, why is timely weaning important? Well, it's just a little take home from a workshop that we'll be promoting shortly, or it's out there at the moment, picking performer ewes. Listen, if you've got a pregnancy lasting 21 weeks from a 5-week joining, lambing starts, lactation kicks in for 14 weeks, that'd be great if we wean them on time. That gives those ewes a 17-week recovery. 17 weeks is a pretty long time and a little bit of an energy surplus in the system to regain condition score. However, if you delay weaning 15 weeks, 16 weeks, it's pretty common down this way. We're all trying to chase the sucker lamb market. That sneaks out to 18 weeks because next week's sale is going to be better than this one. And before you know it, you should have, you missed the sale, and now they're 20 weeks of post weaning and the ewes are skinny and the pastures are buggered. And now you've only got 11 weeks for those ewes to recover. It's not long enough. The season's cut out. There's no green in the system. It's cart and carry feed to these ewes all the way through to joining, and you've missed a great opportunity to pile and condition score. So weaning on time is very, very, very important. Early weaning, just touching on early weaning. This year, certainly down south, we're seeing some, the benefits of early weaning will come into their own. We've got really limited pasture resources. How early is too early? Well, if you could, you'd probably do it at 8 weeks because the lambs are pretty much fully adapted to pasture and limited nutrition coming from the ewe. You could get away with it, but how would you do it? Well, that would mean early and lating or having a split joining, so a bit hard to do. Animal health and husbandry needs need to be attended, so parasite burdens cleaned up, booster vaccinations given, splitting out those lighter under target weight weaners, and then monitoring your weaner growth rate through spring and into summer so that we're on track. Again, little plug for the Winning with Weaners workshop. It's a great little one-day workshop to get your skills up for weaner management. Now, why is weaning percentage important? Well, weaner percentage has a pretty big impact on your gross margins. So obviously, if you go from 83 to 104 to 125, like a 50% increase, has a massive lift in your gross margins in the enterprise. This is for a 18 micron. It's from the 2024 gross margin budgets. Bit of sensitivity table there. You can sort of say, well, wouldn't it be nice to go from there to here with our surplus ewe prices nudging out? But wouldn't it be better if we were nudging out there at $91? Should be pretty achievable with prices where they are at the moment. So yeah, weaner percentage has a big impact on gross margin performance because surplus meat, surplus sheep, lamb sales is the biggest contributor to a lot of farm economic performance at the moment. So just a slide I pinched out of the Picking Performer Ewes workshop. Are you running passengers or performers? Basically, this workshop will help you unpack what it is that makes a top performing ewe in your flock. There's a lot of tactics which we've talked about here today to get rid of the passengers and keep the performers in your flock. On average, a ewe will contribute about $600. Sorry, a performer ewe contributes over $600 more, so nearly double in her lifetime in economic value compared to, say, your passenger, your bottom performing ewe. So what's a bottom performing ewe? Well, she doesn't wean a lot of lambs. She doesn't rear a lot of lambs. She doesn't get pregnant every time she has a chance to get pregnant. She repeats bad behaviour. So if we can weed those out of your flock and keep more of the performer ewes, you'll be over $600 ahead in lifetime performance. The notable thing is it's really hard to detect passengers because when it comes around to being a 5-year-old ewe, you'll go, geez, that's a good looking ewe. You'll keep her in the flock. Why? Because she's big and shiny and got a beautiful fleece. Well, so she should have. She probably hasn't weaned many lambs in a lifetime. So knowing when to get rid of them, identifying those twice dries, identifying maidens that have been a dry and then repeating. Pretty rare that they come back into the system, but if they are repeat offenders, they need to go. Won't go into the metrics of it too much, but it just looking at the values, the wool values of passengers and performers, not a huge difference there. Not a huge difference in cast for age value either. But where the big difference is in that lamb weaner net reproduction rate, or number of lambs weaned per joining event for those performer ewes is way miles and light years in front. So if you're not scanning, you're not being able to detect those twice dries. If you're not wet and drying, you're not able to detect those ewes that have lambed and lost. I think anyone sacking a lot of ewes this year at landmarking for being dry when lamb survival has been so compromised, probably a little bit harsh. Identify them if you're going to need them to rebuild your flock, but if you had them identified and have done it 3 times, well, it's probably time for them to go. What is a fit ewe? Fit ewes basically conceive more often, lamb down more lambs, lamb down better, and rear more lambs more often. A bit of data from the Fit to Join project at MLA suggests a sound ewe is $4 to $8 per head more profitable than an unsound ewe. So, what's a sound ewe? Well, we'll go over the 3 T's in a moment, but a quick classing is really important. Whether that's done at weaning time or whether you do it pre-joining, really quite critical. Kicking out those faults that cost you money, cost you time. Your feet, your fleece rots that are fly strike prone, your daggy sheep that are always daggy, the face cover, the ones that sort of get a face full of grass seeds, if that's the case. There's also your 3 T's. So what are the 3 T's? Basically, teeth, so sound mouth, good teeth, toes, poor foot structure, bad pasterns, limping, lameness, any forms of abscesses on those feet, they need some attention. And the teats, the udder, the teats, any mastitis, any malformed or deformed teats, any ligaments that are gone, the udders are on the ground, they just got to go. Cull your twice dries if it's been a pretty mild conditions and the weather factor hasn't come over the top of you. I always say, is it her fault, your fault, or the weather's fault? So before you cull a ewe, if she's, consistently not delivering lambs, well, put her in with the weathers or get rid of it. But we really do need to look at some of our older ewes to be retained. The 3 T's, the other obvious one is if you're doing it post-weaning, this sort of rough class up or a bit of eyes on the flock. If ewes in the mob haven't recovered condition score when 95% of the ewes have, there's probably a good chance that there's some underlying infection or cause for that ewe not to have regained condition score. So post-weaning, no recovery. It's pretty much an easy cull for me. If you go looking hard enough, you'll probably find a fault there that you can cull that ewe on. So retaining older ewes, some work here out of New South Wales DPI and AWI, keeping productive older ewes, quite a good read up in there. Over a 10-year period, a lift in number of lambs weaned or a net reproduction rate, the components that make up that increase, if you're actively selecting genetics, you can actively also select the older ewes into your mob, the ones that are performing a whole lot better. If you select them into your flock, it's building on a great foundation. And look to your older ewes to rebuild post-drought as well. Sound older ewes do have the highest reproductive potential. You've just got to look after them. Ewe selection contributed over 76% of the increase in net reproduction rate over a 10-year period. So we got a 15% increase over 10 years. Only 24% of that increase was sort of genetics. That's coming in from the rams. So there is multiple areas to make gains. Culling those twice dries at 2 and 3 year old. Improve eugenetics. So that's obviously a really long, slow burn. It's a long road to getting a high fertility flock if you're going to breed your way there. Bringing in better ram genetics is going to help you get there. But basically, if you at an early age, you can identify these older ewes that are performing a whole lot better and just keep them for another year or so, you'll be able to make some pretty rapid gains. Keep moving. Okay, listen, as I said, you won't get a talk from me without touching on genetics, but listen, genetics are absolutely a foundation stone of every flock. We're often very proud of our flocks, but is it really that good? Genetics are permanent and cumulative, so building on good genetics and keeping them in the flock will get you to where you want to be faster. Is your flock performance being restricted by inferior genetics? How would you know? Do you do any benchmarking outside of your flock? Do you demonstrate to yourself that breeding values are improving year on year? Do you demonstrate to yourself that where you were 5 years ago is vastly different to where you are now, or are you still about the same? So doing some benchmarking in your flock, what are your options? Well, classing ram selection, very, very important. ASBVs when selecting your rams towards your breeding objective, critical. Do you have an actual breeding objective communicated to the team that you're actually selecting ewes and rams and going forward into meeting that breeding objective? Have you considered a genomic flock profile for your ewes, youngest ewes? If you haven't got ASBVs on your ram team and you want to find out where your flock's actually sitting, well, that's the one way you can do it these days. Outside of your flock, you could do participate in a weather trial for bloodline analysis. Ram team manager, the Ram Select Ram team manager demonstrates genetic improvement year on year on year. So, is your foundation getting firmer and better and stronger? If you're doing progeny testing, Ram Team A versus Ram Team B, it needs to be a little bit more thorough than, gee, they look all right, or they're a bunch of culls. So, great opportunities coming up to do objective assessment with part of the bigger cost, I suppose, was the EID component, but now that's taken care of. Listen, just quickly, the Australian Merino sire evaluation site, the 2023 drop in the New England, it showed really big variation. Like you've got 3 microns difference between your finest and your broadest. You've got over 20%, 30% variation in clean fleece weight within those 15 sires evaluated just out of your Urala there. So, picking the right genetics can absolutely get you towards your breeding objective. Loads and loads of variation in this evaluation. So, depends on what your breeding objective is. If you're chasing micron and fleece weight, you want them to be up here in the top left. But if you're micron, if you're focused on fertility and growth rate, well, some of those other sides might be more applicable. Just another one from the Peter Westwade Memorial Weather Trial, 2004 to 2020. So you've got 355 weather trial teams being evaluated on this slide there. What this shows is that there's 30% variation between fleece values at the left hand to the right hand of that red arrow, basically for having a carcass that's the same. You've got the same standard reference weight. You've got the same cassiterase ewe weight at the end of her life. You've got very similar, probably potential weaner weight or yearling weight where you're selling your wether weaners at. But 30% variation in fleece value is enormous. And you can see a massive spread there across that trial. Just getting to the final slides. So building foundations on your flock, some really key metrics to measure. So knowing your standard reference weight, so you know what your weaner weight needs to be. You need to know what your yearling weight target weight is, your maiden 85% of your maiden weight for your standard reference weight for joining successfully. ME requirements vary greatly from a dry sheep. A dry sheep in confinement, for instance, versus a dry sheep is vastly different to a single and a twin, or either pre-lambing or into lactation. Investigate your conception response rate per condition score. To do that, there'll be a link through to a DPI fact sheet. Lifetime year management explains it. But essentially, condition scoring some ewes, joining, mixed age ewes, skinnies and fats, and then lining that response up to their conception rate at scanning will give you a regression line. It could be 20, it could be 30, it could be 10. Metrics, really important to build off those KPIs gathered at scanning time. Lambs marked to ewes joined, the true lamb marking percentage, not the one that we all want to tell our mates down at the pub, but lambs marked to ewes joined. That's the one we've got to work off. To get to that, you've got dries. To get to that, we've got twins and singles to survival. Building on that, we've got weaner survival, lamb survival as well. One of the key foundations of a productive flock is going to be a sound breeding objective. Doing some genetic benchmarking, making sure you are making improvements, and a measure to manage mentality for flock improvement. If you jump into a picking performer ewes workshop, you'll go away with a whole heap of really simple metrics to collect and measure and make decisions on. Won't dwell too long on that. Final slide. So you got some really big wins. I'm talking 10, 20, 30%ers out there, guys and girls. Some really big wins to be had from really basic decisions. So confinement feeding can save you 15% in megajoules of energy per head per day. Getting a little bit of extra condition score on your ewes at joining time can often lead, or could lead to a massive increase in conception rate. Around a 25% increase in twin lamb survival when condition score is optimised. So missing a twinning mob condition score target by 0.25 or half a condition score has massive impacts on your lamb survival, weaning percentages, replacement lambs, sale weaners. It just goes on and on and on. The lifetime year management profiles, even though this is on the right-hand side there, the numbers are probably a little bit out of date, but the percentages still add up. So managing your flock to a profile that is optimized will give you 8 to 17% increase in profitability. So obviously the bottom one there is the biggest hit. The red line's the biggest hit to your bottom line. And the top line there would just be like, the old Facebook farm manager. Oh, I manage my sheep to 3 all year round. It's costing you money having fat sheep when they don't need to be fat and the pasture isn't there. So if you've got feed in the system and you can get game when you need it, lamb when you need to, you'll make more money. Weaning percentage, who wouldn't want more extra, more weaners at the moment, more wethers to sell next year, more ewes to replace, cast for age ewes or put into a restocker market in the future. Use your best available in genetics. Listen, the input costs are virtually the same per head, so same per DSE. So why wouldn't you grab genetics that are better and more profitable if you know they exist? And don't sack, really be conscientious of what you do tip out the gate and when you tip out the gate, especially if you're in a flock rebuilding phase. So there's some really big wins from basic decisions. I don't think any of that cost you any money other than the preg scanning component and getting your hands on your ewes to find out your condition score profiles. Some good tips there. Get along to some of these workshops, get enrolled in a lifetime ewe course and get yourself some big wins from some basic decisions. So there we go. Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks, Jim. Great webinar. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I have put the standard reference weight calculator in the chat for you, for everybody. And there's also the value of pregnancy scanning fact sheet as well that Jim referred to. So I'll kick off because we are a little bit over time. Sorry about that, everybody, but
Sorry
it was
about
a
that.
presentation. First comment is great webinar. Thank you, Jim. Can the slides be emailed out to participants, please? Those slides will be on our website in the coming week or so. They're normally up within a week. I just don't like making those promises, but it should be smooth sailing and be up there very shortly. So have a look at them along with all our other webinars under the webinar section of AWI Extension New South Wales. Jim, does shearing interrupt you ovulation? This person shears and joins in January when it's very hot over in Western Australia. So should they join for a little bit longer than 5 weeks?
Well, I'm not too. Yeah, shearing's really stressful, and stress is not great for reproduction. My biggest concern is probably, are they
Sorry,
shearing?
should they join? Oh no, does shearing interrupt? Yeah, should
Yeah,
they
yeah.
join?
So shearing. Listen, I'd be leaving it till post shearing if I could. If I was joining and taking the rams out at shearing and hoping that most of the pregnancy action got happening in the first 5 weeks, and if you when do they say they're joining?
So they're joining in January when it's really hot over in WA, but they're joining and shearing in the same month.
Yeah, okay. Wouldn't, but it's not ideal. It's not ideal. And my biggest concern would be is when the rams are being shorn, if they're using sedative on the rams and it's hot, that can really impact the ram's fertility. So again, it's not always the ewe's fault. Sometimes the rams can have some pretty big issues with ram fertility. So the sedative that you use for your rams can have impact on thermoregulation, and really you could basically cook all that viable sperm.
Thanks, Jim. Next question.
So I was just going to go back.
Sorry.
January. So January, you may or may not be getting the ram effect. It'd be very interesting to see activity in that flock when the rams come in, when the flock comes in for shearing. Um, you know, shearing's, anytime you yard ewes and rams, it's a great opportunity for rams to get a lot more ewe and ram contact. So that's a good thing. Um, but yes, shearing is really stressful, and I would sort of suggest that if shearing could be done earlier, get it done then, or get it done at the end of harvest, and then give everything a chance to get joined up without too much commotion or stress. Okay, next question.
When would you recommend taking ewes out of confinement during mid-pregnancy? The table that you put up, Jim, has energy requirements increasing around day 100. So would this be a good time to take them out of confinement onto pasture?
I'd probably leave it, another 3 weeks. You could quite easily leave it another 3 or 4 weeks. Depends on your situation. As Alicia asked that question, really does depend on your situation, and every day in confinement is probably worth 3 days of pasture growth during lambing at the moment. So if you really needed that pasture for lambing and you had a lot of twins on board, I'd be trying to maximise pasture production by keeping ewes off those pasture paddocks leading up to late pregnancy. Yeah. The singles, listen, you could quite easily leave your singles in there up until a couple of weeks pre-lambing beginning.
Thanks, Jim.
Good
Weaning
question, though.
at 45% standard reference weight while keeping weaning early, aren't twin lambs going to be lighter and therefore disadvantaged? Should they be kept separate and fed differently? And I'm assuming they mean should the lambs be kept separate and fed differently because we still want to wean at that 12 to 14 weeks?
Yeah, good question. And absolutely, if you can, listen, when I was chief mall officer in Armidale and we had little 50 kilo ewes running around, and the recommended guidelines were 40%. So I don't know where this 5% snuck into the system, but it just pushes you along a little bit. So we used to sort of 40% of 50 is 20 kilos, and that was sort of seemed pretty unachievable for a lot of New England sheep anyway. But now we're getting there, and then all of a sudden the goalposts shift, and we've got to get to 24 kilos now. So it is a push. It really is. And if it's a tight season, absolutely those twinners are going to be handicapped right from the get-go. They're 5 kilos lighter at weaning. So absolutely, if you've got mobs that are going to be of a decent enough size and you've got paddocks that you can put the lighter, smaller, the twins obviously, into a separate paddock and get them away from those big bully singles, you'll see them flourish and do a lot better. Not too many singles are going to be below those target weaning weights. If you've got a 7-week joining and you're putting the rams out in February and you're looking at the tail end of your weaner mob, I'd imagine there's going to be a pretty big tail in there, and you'd have to be getting those tail enders out of that mob. They're going to be really prone to ill thrift and not being there come yearling. Just shorten your joining up. Like if you're joining February, March, April, 5 weeks is all you need. It's all you need, and it's all they should need.
Fantastic, Jim. That's the last of our questions. Thanks everyone for joining in question time, and a huge thank you to Jim for putting that presentation together. That was jam-packed with heaps of useful information. So thanks very much.
Yeah. If that person from WA if you want to get them in touch with me, Fiona, I'm happy to give them a call. It sounds like an interesting scenario. Just whether it's the beginning or the end of joining, that's the question for me. Thanks everyone for joining. It's been a great roll-up. I saw a few names from all over the country there. So thank you very much, and good luck with the late break and lambing, and make the most of some fantastic prices. Thank you.
Thank you. Join us for our next webinar on the 19th of August. As Jim hinted at the beginning of his presentation, we will be joined from Jess Patton from Agrista, talking all about unpacking wool performance and measuring your flock's productivity. Don't get scared away about this. This is not going to be a full-blown benchmarking thing. We're really going to keep it practical and back to basics and work out exactly what you can measure to increase your performance. So it's going to be a really fantastic webinar, and I look forward to seeing you all in August. That's all for us now today at AWI Extension New South Wales. I look forward to seeing you all again next month. Bye for now.